Can't
Funny
can't hear
is, you didn't hear me. Okay, all right. Let's try this again. Can you hear me now? It's like that old cell phone commercial. All right. So, hello and welcome to House Call with Dr. Gigi. I, of course, am Ellis Dean. I'm not Dr. Gigi. I am Ellis Dean, the director of programming here on blackdoctor.org. And we are excited to have you here. We love Dr. Gigi. Y'all know Dr. Gigi. I ain't got to tell you about Dr. Gigi. All right. So, but tonight we have a special guest, as you can see here on screen, and you probably have seen this person. You may have seen this person before. That is Dr. Rhonda Maddox. She is a board certified psychiatrist, and she is also the host of "I'm Not Crazy But," which is on every Thursday at 12 o'clock Eastern, 11 Central, here on BlackDoctor.org, and that is a I want to call it a funtastic. I'm going to make up a word, a funtastic program that we do every Thursday with Dr. Rhonda and friends. And so I have the honor of being a guest ever so often. She lets me come from behind the mic and producing and let me get on the show. So that being said, we have a serious topic. We're going to keep it fun. We're going to bring in some serious matters, but we're going to keep it fun because we want you to understand and stick around because we're talking about kids, drugs, and mental illness. And we're going to bring that connection, right? So, as we know, I believe it's 23 states now that the use of cannabis is legal. Marijuana, sticky, icky, whatever y'all want to call it, it is marijuana and it is legal in 23 states. However, there as the use has gone up, so has the incidences of mental illness, and I'm talking severe mental illness, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia has also gone up. And I have a few stats here that I was nerding out, and I was trying to give y'all some kind of context here. So this is from Dr. Google. So y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but 13.5% of young adults aged 18 to 25 has had a substance use disorder and a mental illness in the past year. 13.5% of young adults age 18 to 25. So that's a significant amount of young people having both. Uh, Also, Dr. Google taught us this bipolar and schizophrenia are 11 times more likely. People that are suffering from bipolar and schizophrenia are 11 times more likely to have a substance use disorder. So they're saying that's comorbid. That's those conditions that are going hand in hand, 11 times more likely. Here's a big one. Another big one that studies have shown using drugs, particularly cannabis, that's that marijuana, cocaine, LSD, or amphetamines can increase the risk of developing schizophrenia, psychosis, or a similar illness. And so, using those drugs, and you see what they put first, cannabis, that's marijuana, can
Yep.
increase the risk of developing schizophrenia and other mental illness. And the last one that I came with, drug misuse can cause changes to the brain structure and function, making people more likely to develop a mental health condition like depression. So, really, while I understand why people, we can talk about the whys of people for using drugs. There's a number of reasons that Dr. Maddox and I were discussing earlier about some of the whys, and she's going to help list some of those whys. The reality is therapy is the best way to get rid of that why than drug use because there are so many things that can go wrong with the prolonged use of drugs. So I know we're 4.5 minutes in and not one of the other guests have talked, so I'm going to shut up and let these folks, let the people to hear the person that the show is named after. Dr. Gigi, how you doing this
I'm
evening?
fine, and I'm so excited to have Dr. Maddox join us today. And the reason, if you recall, Mr. Ellis, the reason we chose a topic related to mental illness was because the last time we had the show, we asked what people wanted to hear about, and they said mental illness, especially since July is mental health awareness, minority mental health awareness month. So that's, number one. So I want to tell you what this show is not. Okay. We are not going to talk about the decriminalizing because I think we all can agree that the criminalization of marijuana in particular has landed a lot of people in prison unfairly for long stretches of time, and that is unjust.
Right.
We're not even going to really talk about older folks who are using marijuana for anxiety or other reasons that they may use it for chronic pain, because there can be legitimate uses. The reason we're going to focus on kids is because I think that marijuana has now gotten this, kind of this rep out there that it's safe, it's nothing to worry about, it's good, it'll make you feel fine. And that's just not true. And of course, I'm a general internist. However, I mean, I take care of most of the people who've got mental illness will actually present to their primary care doctor before they will see a therapist or a psychiatrist. And I want to share some disturbing stories with you. I have three of my friends, I'm just talking about my friends, who all three of their kids landed in the psychiatric unit with psychotic breaks. Two of them are now diagnosed as bipolar. The other one is severely mentally ill with schizophrenia. And these are in my circle, okay? I'm not even talking about the kids that have died because the marijuana was laced with something. And let me just be clear, I am going to be turning 64 next month. Marijuana was something that we all dabbled with, right? Where I went to school at University of Michigan, that was the preferred drug of choice. There was no alcohol. There were bongs that were 6 feet high, but I want to tell you, the stuff that we smoked back then was rope. It was hemp. It is not what is out there now. When I was driving my folks earlier today, and I said, "Oh, you smell that? That's skunk. That's marijuana." My dad is like, "No, it's not. That's a skunk." No, it's not. That is actually marijuana. He's like, "No, it's a skunk." No, it's not. So, all kidding aside, the stuff that is out there is very, very strong. We know that it's laced with all kinds of things. We are seeing people, and not just young people. In DC, we had about, I don't know, like a bunch of middle aged women who actually dropped dead because it was laced with fentanyl. So these are serious, serious topics. So I want to bring Dr. Rhonda in to really help us understand, why is marijuana, and we're going to focus first on marijuana, why is marijuana, sort of that double-edged sword, especially with kids and young people?
I think you started out talking about it. We we associate marijuana with the marijuana of the 70s and 80s. And the truth of the matter is that marijuana had about 2% THC in it. And then it got, that range got larger, it went to 4%, and now we're at 17 to 19% THC. And that's the addictive part, right? And so it's more addictive, and the higher the potency of THC, and I don't want to get too technical, but I need you to understand there's a huge difference between 2% THC in the 70s, 80s, maybe early 90s to 17 to 19% now. So it's more addictive. And that THC component is actually a part of what is associated with why we're seeing even increase in aggression, increase in psychosis, and that kind of thing. Now, let me just give you a little bit of my background. I am one of three integrative behavioral health psychiatrists in the state. And that's a fancy way of saying I work with primary care docs in offices to treat the medical issues that are going on, and then also to see people with mental health issues. As you said, most people go to see their internal medicine doc, their primary care doc, and in part that's because of a lot of the stigma. So when I was working in academic setting, I started to see something really striking to me. These people in their 20s would come in and say they would come in with strokes, they would come in psychotic, and when I did their history, they would say, "I've I only took marijuana." And I'm like, "Come on now, really? Really though? Just marijuana?" And then lo and behold, their drug studies would come back and there would only be marijuana. And so after you see this enough, and this is striking because this is really, really different than what I was seeing in the early 2000s. And so by 2016, I'm seeing stroke and all of this. And I started to do the deeper dive, and what was happening is they were telling the truth. It was just marijuana, but the type of marijuana it was not what we were thinking. the potency was there. And as a person who now works in juvenile justice, that means I work with all. If your child goes through the state of Arkansas, they're going to see me at some point. And one of the questions I ask is, have you done marijuana, vaping, or whatever in family? When I tell you these babies are saying they started at 8 years old,
Yes.
9 years old. My first week there, the first day I saw 5 kids. 4 of the 5 kids had already done marijuana and had done it by 11. It freaked me out because I had an 11-year-old daughter at the time, and I was like, whoa, Nelly. But at 11, we're not thinking. We're not thinking to talk to our kids necessarily at 11. And so that was my wake up call to like talk to my friends, just like you said, hey, what are we talking about?
Yeah, I think, it's become so normalized, and, we're in DC, so it is decriminalized here.
Oh,
I just want to make a very quick point. Decriminalized doesn't mean that on job, because this is an issue, people will go for their job drug studies, I mean, the drug screens rather,
mhm.
and it'll come up positive because people will smoke marijuana on the weekends. And of course, it stays in your system for several weeks. And they're like,
Mhm.
well, but it's decriminalized. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that your job is okay with you smoking it, and so
Right.
that actually interferes with the ability to get employed sometimes. But here, the edibles, I mean, now you can go anywhere and a 12-year-old can buy like an edible. I mean, to me, that's pretty ridiculous.
Well,
Yes.
and the other piece though is that because it is legal, they think it's safe. And what they don't realize is that the politicians have duped the children. And I say that most respectfully, politicians. But by virtue of the fact that they made it legal, it said, hey, this is safe to them. But I want to draw your attention to the fact that nicotine is legal and it's not safe. So just because it's not that it's legal in certain areas does not mean that it's safe, and certainly not safe for the developing brain that's still growing. And
Mhm.
what I see more than anything, before I knew anything about the literature, what I saw was that it was taking away their hustle. Now, the fancy term in my circle is executive functioning, but in your
Yeah.
in your in your world, it's their hustle. And so their hustle and their grind. So I saw straight A students start making all D's and F's. People who were dressed in preppy started looking like grunge or gothic or whatever. And it just took away their sense of pride, so to speak, their
Mhm.
sense of hustle, their sense of caring about things.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that was my exposure to it in 2006, 2007. And then you fast forward, and now it's something completely different. Now it's psychosis.
Yes, that's exactly right. So please help us with that term, Dr. Maddox, because psychosis, in normal sort of parlance, people will use that term around.
Right.
But what does that actually mean? What does that look like?
Oh, that's a great question. So it means that your brain is playing tricks on you. In certain parts of your brain, you have a chemical called dopamine that's going crazy. In other parts of your brain, it's not high enough. And And so your brain starts to play tricks on you to where other people in the room are not having the same experience that you are. You're hearing things that they can't hear. You're seeing things that they can't see. Sometimes people will say, I hear my name called. Or, and they'll keep coming into the room. Did you call me? And if you are in the Bible Belt, they have this story where I think Samuel kept going back to Eli saying, did you call me? And then they were like, it's the Lord calling you, baby. So sometimes the religious people will say, it's the Lord calling you. And it's not the Lord calling you all the time.
Yes, yes, yes. That's
Okay.
right. That's
For the
right.
Hearing and
TikTok,
seeing things that aren't there, getting really paranoid and just
Yes.
experiencing things differently than
Well,
what people around you are experiencing.
there was a popular video here recently. It was a young lady, and she was getting exited off of a plane, and somebody had videotaped it, and she was going on a tirade about somebody being on the back of that plane, and there was supposed to be a real person, and everybody was like, what is she talking about? So that is psychosis in real life that was videotaped, and you could tell that she was under the influence of some substance.
mhm.
I don't think it was just
Mhm.
because, you know, I've been known to have a drink or two, and I've never had that kind of experience
Well,
with
and
alcohol.
let's talk about alcohol because people think it's like, well, alcohol is not safe. So no, it's not. So it's not saying that one drug or prescribed medications, for heaven's sakes, they've got toxic side effects. And we can't predict who necessarily is going to have a side effect.
Right,
That's the thing. And that's what I really want to bring out.
Mhm.
People, in terms of genetic susceptibilities to diseases like schizophrenia or high blood pressure or diabetes or bipolar, nobody checks your genetics before they give you a medication, right? I mean, people don't go and get their gene analysis before they take a hit of marijuana or eat it or whatever else, the other ways that they snort it or however else they take it. So it's kind of like it's like a crapshoot. I mean, you're really
Russian
taking
roulette,
uh,
really.
yeah, so you're really playing with fire. So, what is the age? Is there a magic age after which we can say, okay, you've held out this long, maybe it's okay for you to take a hit of marijuana and not really jeopardize your brain? Seriously, though, I'm really asking for seriously.
So you may want to direct that question to Ellis because I have seen so much that one of the things that when I'm doing a history, if someone says that they have a family history of bipolar disorder or a family history of alcohol use disorder or those kinds of things, I am like I am a staunch opponent of children and marijuana, period. There is not like an age. It is, I'm strongly opposed to it because your future is in jeopardy. Your hustle, your grind is in jeopardy, and your ability to control your impulses. Now, you all know you were young, you already think you're invincible, and that's without an ounce of anything in your system. So then you throw in that piece and then what's associated with it. And if you really dig into what's happening in Colorado, you will see that the suicide, when they do those suicide basically autopsies, that marijuana is one of the number one things that they find in on the urine drug screen. Marijuana, so it's definitely associated with suicide attempts. Now, some people try to disentangle and say, but not suicides. But suicide attempts are going to lead to suicide. It's definitely associated with um, psychosis. And when people tell when my babies, my kid, when the kids in the juvenile justice system, I love them, so they're mine. When they tell me that they're using substances, one of the things that I say is, well, what is it doing for you? Because if you think about it, people don't just think, I want to be a loser or whatever. It's doing something for them, and they tell me this. It helps me to calm down. It helps me to sleep. It helps me to numb, and it helps me to forget. Okay. And so that whole anxiety thing, though, is a trick. It's to dupe them because short term, it helps with anxiety, but chronic use of it actually increases anxiety.
mhm.
Chronic use of it actually increases depression. And so it tricks you. It's a bait and switch.
Mhm, mhm. And let's not forget, it's now a multi whatever trillion-dollar business, and once something is making a lot of money, there are gonna be all kinds of tricks to get you to get started and stay addicted to it. I guess I'm talking about the developing brain up to the age of 25. People tend to think of the developing brain as like, okay, when you turn 16, then you're set. Well, actually, the developing brain is really 25. If I were in charge, well, you probably say even higher than that. But if
No,
I
no, I was saying not 16. I was saying, yeah, 25. You
right
had to go higher to
higher,
16.
but like if I were in charge, I wouldn't let people drive until they were 25.
Right. I caught
Other
that.
other things that I would also I would not have them sign up for the military and so forth. But in kidding aside, I think that we don't really realize how precious our brains are. And once you go down that road and you're dealing with a chronic mental illness, I have family members that have chronic mental illnesses, and it is heartbreaking. It can destroy the family.
Mhm.
It destroys, to your point, Dr. Rhonda, the the drive, of a
Mhm.
person. And you can always tell on the road when somebody is high on marijuana because they, speaking of drive, they drive like 15 miles an hour. I'm serious. When
They're
you
in no hurry.
really slow, you're like, I bet you they're high. And sure enough, you pass and you smell the skunk. It's like, okay, there's everything to slow down. Am I right?
I'm gonna start looking for that now, Dr. Gigi. I have to
No,
tell
it's
you.
true.
Oh,
It's
I
true.
see it in Atlanta. I see it in Atlanta. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm like, why is he driving so slow? Oh, and
Yeah.
then then you see him. Okay. So I want to give a shout out to Goldie because she is rocking with us right now. She had a question as soon as we got started, and the question was really, so a person has to use that on a daily basis to get those symptoms. And so she was asking, does a person have to use on a daily basis to get those symptoms? And I'm gonna give my layman's explanation, and then we're gonna let Dr. Maddox and professionals take it over. But I would say um, it could take one time, and you've seen their anecdotal stories where people say, "I took one drink, and next thing you know, they were on the road to alcoholism." I took. It could be one thing. If you have the genetic disposition
Mhm.
that will make you susceptible to a mental illness, using marijuana, particularly as Dr. Rhonda so eloquently explained earlier, how it is the THC level is much higher
Hmm.
in the marijuana that's around today. It could just be that one time, and then people are lacing it to try to get you more
Yes.
addicted because they want to. So there's a whole lot. I mean, I did formaldehyde. There's been all kind of stuff
Oh,
that gets
yes.
in these marijuana. So it could just take that one, and the next thing you know, you've had a psychotic break. And it's not even about addiction at this point. It's about now you're going to be dealing with some level of mental illness the rest of your life
Well,
because
then, it's interesting, Dr. Aranda, you work with juveniles in the criminal justice system. Black kids, Black young people don't get a pass. Immediately, they're thrown into the criminal injustice system. So that
Mm.
puts them on a completely different path, even with a mental illness. So it takes away educational opportunities. A psychotic break could land you in jail,
mhm.
It
and
does.
then you get put into that system. Forget it.
Or dead if the wrong officer shows up and
Right,
you're having an issue, and we've already heard those stories
right,
about
right.
people. Yep.
Well, so please, I want to hear more from you about the kids that you treat, because obviously they're the ones that have gotten caught in the juvenile justice system. I mean, is there a way for them to get out, or how do you deal with them? To the question that Ms. Goldie asked, she's also asking, what's a psychotic break? I'll toss that back to you, Dr. Rhonda. She's asking what
Now,
the
So
have
answer
you
psychotic break and then talk about your
first
kids.
or okay, so a psychotic break. Now, the layman's term is, they'll use it for everything from depression to had a panic attack or whatever. But when we're talking about a psychotic break, we're talking about many times the one of the first times that a person has experienced the the hearing things that aren't there, the seeing things that aren't there, the paranoia, sometimes feeling like things are crawling on them. If you watched Ray, the movie Ray with Jamie Foxx, you will notice that when he was addicted, he kept like scratching and there was this little thing, this shape that he had, and so it can feel like things are crawling inside of you. Many times people can get paranoid and think people are out to get them, that they are trying to do them harm. I remember probably 15 years ago, a patient who was probably in about the ninth grade, who was selling drugs, said to me that someone turned around in his yard and he was paranoid about it and thinking about going to get a gun to shoot the person that was turning around in their yard. And I realized at that point, long before the guy who knocked on the door and then he got shot, I realized way back then, before that had happened, that
Mhm.
you don't know who is living in those houses. And folks can be really touched, as they used to say when I was younger.
Mhm.
So it is a really a difference in your perception, and you're not grounded in reality. And so you're responding to internal stimuli that does not exist in reality. Dr. Gigi, you want to add
Yeah,
anything?
I would
Oh,
just say break with reality, make it easy.
mhm,
A
mhm.
psychotic break is that you're just not, you're
Right.
not you're not in your right mind. Okay, things are completely turned around. So you're, as you mentioned, you're seeing things that aren't there, hearing things. I remember I didn't have a psychotic break, but one of the marijuana, when I had, I was in a sophomore, and my roommate, let me tell you, she was a bad influence. For a year she tried to get me to smoke, and I'm like, no, no, no. You know how they try to get at the goody two shoes. So finally, she got me to smoke, and so I did. And all of a sudden, I mean, it must have been strong. I was just seeing all kinds of colors, and I said, "Okay, let me just go to sleep." I knew that if I got some sleep, I could calm myself down. So I went into a box of crackers, and it was as though they were all filled with ants.
Mm,
It freaked me out. That was like,
yeah.
you don't do
And
this.
that was with 2%, right?
Yeah,
That's 2%
exactly.
THC.
2%. I will never forget it. And then I was putting the crackers in my mouth, and it was just, I'm like, okay, calm down, just go to sleep.
Yeah.
And that was okay. I'm done. Scared
And
straight.
yeah, and the other piece that's such a powerful sharing that you did, because the other piece though is that it will lower your defense. And I cannot tell you how many women have been raped
Mm,
Mm,
while on alcohol or marijuana for the first time, and they did not. We talk a lot about consent, but they did not have the wherewithal to consent, and then did not know who had
oh,
done it, because there was this amnesia part component that was associated with it, so didn't even know who. So I need you to understand, when you are sending your children, we're about to send our kids off to college. If you are listening to me and you're sending your kids off to college, number one, teach them not to be doing drugs and alcohol and being at parties. Even, we have people who are on the Supreme Court that have been accused of participating in parties in these types of activities, right? So going to parties, you go together, you leave together, you go to the bathroom together. I had someone that I love dearly, that I never imagined this had happened to, talked about riding with someone, and then that someone paired up with their boyfriend and said, you go home with someone, such and such is going to drive you home, and that person did not drive her home.
oh my.
Okay. So parents, please, 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 in the context of your drug talks, also talk about the fact that the risk is not just that, you will test positive for a urine drug screen and have a job offer rescinded, but you could really endure something very traumatizing that you are then left to pick up the pieces years later.
Mhm.
I would add to the psychotic break piece that I think in Dr. Gigi's experience, that was a psychotic break. Now,
Mm.
luckily, it
Yeah,
didn't. It
sure.
didn't. Yes, it was short
Mhm.
while the drugs were in her system. She got them
Yeah.
out, and she returned back to normal. But that psychotic break can last for the rest of your life, and you cannot. And even out once the drugs have left the system, your brain is still experiencing those symptoms that Dr. Maddox is talking about. And that's where this whole program is about tonight, is talking about the use of the drugs. And it's like, you're pulling on that lever at the slot machine, right? And
Mhm.
one time, it may not be the first time, it may not be the second, it
Mhm.
may not
Mhm.
be the 50th time. But that 51st time, you pull on it, boom, that's what happened. And then it doesn't go away. And so we have to be, so what we're trying to present tonight is a cautionary tale through stories and the reality of the physiology of how this could really, really happen to you. And particularly, the thing that you don't know is how your brain is wired, what your chemical makeup, what your individual is like. So it could take somebody 200 times, it could take you twice. It
Well,
could
and
take,
I also want to talk. Thank you. I think those are such important points. I also want to talk about the social and societal context.
Mm.
because, and we'll come back to talking about the why is it people are doing this? What is the pain that they are feeling to try to calm themselves down? I think COVID, especially for young people, really hit them hard. But you
Mhm.
also have, there's a sense of hopelessness that we all, to some degree, feel given what's happening in our society and the rolling back of, 50 years of hard won legislation and changes. But then for young people, the future and what that means for us with a few gray hairs, we can think back about times that were happy. We didn't miss our, the milestone events and so forth. And we know that with time, this too shall pass. We have that perspective. A younger person doesn't. So you're hearing a lot of young people just talk about, we don't want to have kids because it's so bad. And then you've got gun accessibility, you've got very hot summers. It's like a perfect storm.
Yes.
So what's changed in the last 3 years? I mean, in your experience, Dr. Maddox, with
I will say what has changed. So, not being able to go to school for a year or so was huge, right? It was huge from a parent's perspective because I'm currently parenting a 13-year-old.
say no more.
Full stop. As they say on the street, that's full stop. Full stop.
So, they know everything and they do not need you for anything except everything.
Exactly.
So, March 2020, I get a text, and the school is telling me, ding, 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 you're up. You are now an educator, unpaid, unappreciated educator, and with no notice. Okay.
Yeah.
So now I'm living the pandemic afraid, hearing stories all the time about people dying. I am under stress. Go a couple of months later, and then we have George Floyd.
Mm.
And
That's
then, and all the while, I am a psychiatrist. I'm married to a doc myself. We are supposed to have our stuff together. Newsflash, we have nothing together.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we are the people that folks are looking to help them. And so our capacity is spent. And then this child is living in the house with two high performing individuals, and we are spent beyond capacity. We
Mhm.
have nothing to give. I'm not educating her, and
Mhm.
she is supposed to grow up and be somewhat sound. Now the odds were already stacked against her because she's my child and her daddy's child. But then you throw all of this stress in, and so I she's a social child. She wanted to go and get out. She went from making pretty decent grades to like not caring at all, right? And we know what she's capable of, and she's not caring. And do you know what I did not do? I did not get on to her for making poor grades, because if the truth be told, I was making poor grades in life right then.
Right.
Okay. And so just really trying to bond. But then that was me, like, and then even if I wanted to, I was too tired to to mess with it. She was on her. So we left all of these kids on their own as we're processing all of this crap. We're processing it. They're watching us process it. We're losing jobs. They're watching us lose jobs. We're on high alert, and they are in the house not going anywhere. And so they're getting the worst of us.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and then the reality is that social isolation, you earlier spoke about dopamine, and so the way that I speak about the chemicals, the neurochemicals that bathe our brains, there's a soup of neurochemicals: dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin, the feel-good hormones. And how we evolved as human beings is that when the three of us are talking, the dopamines in our brains are going up, right?
Mhm.
We're feeling good, we're interacting,
right.
but stress brings them down. So, to
Mhm.
your point, being isolated, not having that social interaction, the serial murders of Black people, the craziness
Mhm.
of the administration, and here in DC,
Mm,
we're in the epicenter.
mm,
Seeing
mhm,
everybody dying, and of course, the disparities of how many Black people and people of color were dying, the fear of COVID. I mean, it was a lot. I mean, and it still is a lot. I mean, we're kind of going to version 2.0 because of the now, I mean, just today, I was driving home and there was a big shooting at a Starbucks in
Mhm.
Maryland. So things are, people are sort of, everything is right under the edge. So
Right.
let's kind of flip it. What are the things that can allow us to kind of refill our cup? Because I feel that, the well is dry. What can we do to kind of build back
mhm.
that resilience, I guess?
Yeah. Our Surgeon General talked about the new public health crisis being loneliness, isolation, and disconnecting. And so I think we have to reimagine what connection looks like. Uh,
Mhm.
and and I mean, I remember doing Christmas dinner with on Zoom with a whole bunch of people. And that was not ideal, but it was something. When my
Mhm.
mother died, I remember people tuning in for funerals from all across the country. And so while I didn't like why that was happening, I was really glad that people could, connect or whatever. And so it looks like maybe outside gatherings. It looks like understanding that life is not promised to us and really being appreciative day by day. It looks like gratitude. It looks like journaling. Um, I the thing that saved me during the pandemic. I am a social creature, but I had no idea of how much I needed hugs. I'm a hugger. I didn't know it, and so I remember my brother like shot me this text, and Ellis, you've probably heard the story. And my brother does not return phone calls, does not answer the phone, doesn't text, might respond to a text if he gets up on the right side of the bed and Venus is lined up with Pluto or something. So he sends me this text and it says, "Hey sis, how are you?" If Ellis had sent me that text, perfunctory, fine. But the fact that it was my brother, so we're 4 months in and I realized I'm not fine. I'm scared. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. Da 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 da. And the tears start flowing. But I have been so checking in on everybody else that I didn't even know how I was doing.
Yes. Yep.
So
Mhm.
we are reimagine it as checking in on ourselves,
Hmm.
and I'm going for nature walks. My daughter got a dog during the pandemic. She'd been begging for a dog for 8 years. I said, babe, we're not clean enough to be dog people. We can't get a dog. She got a dog. Okay. I'm like, I'm not mopping daily. I
Right.
got a little OCD edge to me. And so we got a dog, right? Um, and you started to see neighbors doing things. And I just, at this point in time now, when I go to church, I am so appreciative. When I see people, I'm so thankful. So for me, it looks like a lot of gratitude, a lot of journaling, a lot of showing people how much I care for them because I'm just so glad they're here, you
Yes,
know?
sure, for
I,
sure.
I I would I would say just for folks, and Dr. Maddox is talking about what we need to do, and this is a technique that's used with people that are in treatment for substance use because you get used to hypervigilance, right? What
Yes.
the way our society is right now, we're at 99, right?
Hmm.
We're at 99, so it don't take long to get. It don't take much to get to 100, right?
Right.
One of those getting set off. One of the things they do in substance abuse, but we can do this in our own lives, is find enjoyment in mundane activities.
Mhm,
What I mean by that is that means number one, put this down, right? Turn it
mhm,
off for a specified period of time. And like your grandmama used to do, go sit on the front porch. and just sit. And it's a mundane activity, but what it does is it brings that threshold down for you to get those pleasure chemicals in your brain to activate again. Because
Yes.
when we're at 99, we're
Mhm.
going to need something really exciting to get us happy, to make us excited. We got to have the biggest thing because we're using drugs that's taking us up. We're having these extreme
Eating,
experiences that's taking
eating.
us up, eating all kind of food that's taking us up. So now walking outside on a nature walk, that's boring. We don't get enough synapses firing off in our brain to make that a pleasurable event. So it takes time to lower that threshold for pleasure in kind of rather what you would see rather innocuous or mundane. I'm using a lot of big $12 words, so I'm gonna run out of them in a minute. It's just regular events that we can enjoy in life. And so that
Well,
would I
listen to this. I mean, I think that is such great advice because you're right. We're just running all the time, and especially if you've got the news or something, and you're hearing all these awful things, it's like you feel like a ping pong ball, right, from one to
Mhm.
the next to the next. So Sunday, they have a movie theater here in town that is not owned by the big chains, right? So Sunday
wow.
at 10:30, they showed the old movie The Sting. Do you know that the movie theater was full?
Mm,
Because we are craving connection.
yes.
Yes.
So actually going to a movie theater, it's a different experience, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
People, I'm always one of these people in the elevator or whatever, I'm always chit-chatting. It turns out that that actually improves our mental health. Just
Yes.
chit-chatting with people. These relationships that we have, the male woman and the people that we interact with, that is how we begin to feel better. And it gives us a sense of connectedness, I think. And that's what I mentioned sort of at the earlier part of of this show is the alienation. So how do
Mhm.
we engage each other, especially our young people, so that they don't feel hopeless, right?
Yeah. I am one who believes that laughter is good for the soul. And my face is getting red as I'm about to share with you what I'm about to.
Okay, go ahead. We're all ears.
So understand, I grew up as the person who was the cerebral one, who was always reading and stuff like that. Husbands in ministry, that kind of stuff. The people that I enjoyed during the pandemic, I stopped watching the news as much as I could, and I
Mhm.
started doing just mindless stuff that I would ordinarily probably have some thoughts about. The thing that brought me some of the most joy was watching Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart. Okay, Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart. Snoop and Martha, if you need a saleswoman for your show, I'm here. Um, Snoop Dogg and Kevin Hart during the Olympics, they had this thing where they were like doing a news show. Oh my lord, it was good for my soul. Now I'm also going to tell you, I self-soothe with bluebell ice cream, honey.
Ooh.
I want you to know that Bluebell got me through some dark nights, okay? And look, it added some COVID calories and I picked up some pandemic pounds courtesy of it. But that even when I didn't have when I wasn't connecting, I felt connected laughing with them and and to me that was the equivalent. I can't say some shows because I don't want to like say bad things about the shows, but there were some shows that I just absolutely would not watch. I
Yeah.
was so surprised at how Kevin Hart and Snoop and Martha, I mean,
That's
I just felt like they were family. Tiffany Haddish, if any of you all are listening, you are invited to my birthday party, okay? I want to be with you guys. You brought me through, baby. They were good medicine for me, okay?
well, well, so it turns out that Netflix has four, at least they did, has four of Sinbad's shows. So that's what I was watching because
Oh yeah, Sinbad.
took
Yeah.
me back.
But
And then
Sinbad is a
I
good
watched
option.
the original Kings of Comedy,
Oh
and
yeah.
let me tell you, Cedric the Entertainer, that part where he's like driving the space
Yeah.
the spaceship.
Comedy is good for the soul. I didn't wait a minute, guys. We are so far. I think maybe off.
Yes, I
Audience, if you're
know.
Well,
listening,
I was about to say, my pleasure that I happened upon one time, and I couldn't believe it. That show, Naked and Afraid. Have you seen that show?
No, I've seen it. And how
Okay.
is it?
The premise is this, and so black folks. There's only been a couple of black folks on this because when I tell you what the premise of the show is, you can be like, "What is this?" So it's a survivalist show. So they take people and they drop them in these remote areas and they have to survive. They had one tool that they can take with them and they have to survive for 21 days. They have to walk in and walk out and live in the jungle on their own. And they have to do it butt naked.
That sounds like a nightmare. That sounds like dreams.
It
Where you're walking
sounds
like
like anxiety.
And I'm trying to tell you, the pandemic, I was like, because I was like, what would make somebody want to do that? Like, first of all, I'm going to have ants and all. I mean, and these people would get bit by bugs. They would have wild animals. They'd be late. It would rain on them. So, Goldie, thank you, Goldie, for getting my back on that. It's a crazy show.
Goldie, don't back him up on this one, sugar. Don't do it.
I'm trying to tell you. Naked and Afraid was
like I couldn't watch something like that.
Oh my goodness. It is. I promise you, Dr. Gigi, you watch one episode, you will be addicted.
So I want to tell you, I want to share something with you. So I think people know that I have Egyptian heritage, right? I was born in Tallahassee and raised in Michigan. Well, Egyptians are known as loving to laugh, no matter what happens, right? And so when you look at, people in Egypt, you will see people walking in the street and joking. I mean, things could be collapsing and singing. People sing a lot, and music is so important, and laughter. And you know what we call Nigerians? The Egyptians of the West. As loud and as funny, because laughter is something that has really gotten people through a lot, right? And it is so important. It's a tonic. And now I was just reading an article. It actually helps your immune system. Did you know that?
Not only that, your respiratory system, and get this, family, belly laughter helps you to burn calories. That's my exercise of choice. Now, if you look at me, you realize it's not working.
If it was working, I'd be a skinny mini.
From a psychological standpoint, laughter, humor is considered a advanced or a well-developed defense mechanisms. We have those defense mechanisms like projection and all these other things. You read about defense mechanisms. It's a Freudian concept. Folks, y'all can look all that up. And there's these really, like Anna Freud kind of developed them for more than her father did. But that notwithstanding, there are lists of defense mechanisms, and there's some that are negative, kind of more negative, like projection. You whatever negative inside you project them into other people. You see that a lot in the political discourse. Like you're saying, this group is grooming children, and you're really part of the group that's been more grooming than anybody else. But we're not talking about that. That's projection. All right. Regret. There's all types of defense mechanisms, but humor is one of those ones that's considered a healthy defense mechanism. Whether you're and not humor where you're just picking on somebody, because that could be kind of antisocial, but just laughter and being able to find humor in those moments that are stressful or that could be, and if you can still find your way to laughing, that is showing that you're protecting your psyche to defend against those things that could be assaulting you, like assaulting your psyche, like what's happening in the world, like a tragedy, like the death of a family member. And that's why when you go to the repast, y'all know, y'all Southern folk, come on with me now. When you go to the repast, and some people get upset that people want to be talking and laughing and enjoying themselves after we just left a funeral, but that is a healthy kind of development, because that shows you process that better as we're moving forward. And so when we're talking about defenses, and Dr. Maddox talked about trying to, I'm gonna steer us back online just a little bit, because we're having a great time. I'm just enjoying the show. Um, but what Dr. Maddox was talking about earlier, what the reasonings that the kids were given for using marijuana says that they haven't developed the skills
Mm.
and built up enough defense mechanisms to be able to withstand the things that they were trying to overcome by using marijuana and using other drugs. And so, what we have to do when we're talking about how do we get beyond that to where we can follow Dr. Maddox's explanation, recommendation, say just don't do it, right? Just like at this
Oh,
point,
that was my recommendation. Yeah. Don't
I,
do it.
I've been tripping that to you, like just don't do it. If we're going to do that, then what we have to do in the stead is help our children, help the youth develop healthy ways of interacting with one another, healthy ways of interacting with other people, find that connection and developing healthy defense mechanisms and a healthy self-esteem and self-awareness where they don't feel the need to use substances in order to normalize their existence.
Well, and then our connectedness is when we're out and about and we run into a child or a young person. I mean, I love to meet kids, maybe on yes, you absolutely love to cut up. Me too. But on an elevator or walking, and then you just engage the child and, you see what they're doing. I mean, we are responsible to all kids and
Mhm.
we are responsible to our communities. And I think that sometimes, people don't want to be bothered. But guess what? It's a mutual benefit. Kids
Mhm.
want to be seen, especially teenagers, even though their family members want to do like this to them. But they really have to be seen and to be acknowledged and to be respected. And I think that, there's so much that has taken us apart. It is up to us to kind of remember sort of what our traditions are, that we're responsible for each other. You know what I mean? That we all benefit from that. Dr. Maddox, I want you to tell us a story with a good outcome, because
I'm
we
so
do a
glad
lot.
you asked me that.
Yeah,
Because I was
please.
thinking I wanted to. So I'm gonna. If you can see this, you can't see it. I've been drinking
Yeah.
from a Maya Angelou cup, and
Yes.
as you were talking, I thought about. Um, I grew up in Stamps, Arkansas, the home that Maya Angelou grew up in, that she wrote about, and I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
Oh, wow.
That's the home that I grew up in, and I was there at least when Ronald Reagan was inaugurated, because I remember watching the um, Iranian hostages be released. So I knew I was there in
Mhm.
1980, but I remember meeting her maybe around the time I was 5 or 6 years old. And I grew up in a time when children were to be seen and not
And I
heard.
heard, yep.
So she is the first adult that I can remember. I remember her kneeling down and making eye contact with me. And she didn't ask me the question that all the adults ask me, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up? She asked me, who did I want to help when I grew up? But
Oh,
here's the
Mm,
thing though, she didn't just ask that question, she waited on me. Now, I don't remember what I said, but I remember that number one, she like got on my level and looked
mhm,
at me. And number two, there were people all around her. She was filming our house. And so the film crew all around was looking like, hurry up already. And she was not distracted by their impatience at all. She was waiting for my answer. And so that piece right there, I remember I didn't know who she was at 5. I knew she was a big deal. But at 13, I read her book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And that's when I realized, ah, this is who I met. When I got to the end of the book and she was a doctor, that is the reason. She is the reason why I wanted to become a doctor. Now, understand, I didn't know it was an honorary doctorate degree. I didn't know she wasn't a physician. But when I saw Black woman doctor and I thought about how much control she had in that situation, I
mm,
wanted to be a doctor.
wow.
And so I want you all to know as you're listening that one encounter with her that long ago is what changed my perspective about what I wanted to be. And if you have an opportunity to have a repeat interaction with a child, how many seeds can you plant and how many dreams can you water?
mm,
That's
mm.
beautiful. That
That's
is
that's
so beautiful.
that's fantastic.
I didn't know how I was going to get to tell you that.
Well,
So
that's
when you
beautiful.
were when you were saying that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I should share this." And so,
Yes.
thank you for giving me the opportunity because
Oh,
that
sure. Well,
means everything.
it's like sometimes we talk about problems, and God knows there are lots of issues, but I think it's just important to talk about good stories because there are good stories. There are a lot of good people out there. You see them all the time. They may not be the flashy people or the ones that get attention, but there's a lot of goodness, I believe. And
I
I
do
think
too.
that we just need to amplify it first, to your point, but just seeing it and identifying it and then sharing it with others because um, there are reasons that people use these drugs and there's
Hmm.
a lot of pain, but social interactions and we are the balm that can help soothe our own pain and others' pain, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. This has just been fantastic. We've talked about everything. We talked about
Yeah.
Snoop Dogg and Martha
Martha
Stewart.
Stewart.
We talked about Naked and Afraid. We talked
Yes.
Cedric the Entertainer.
So
And,
here, if you want another guilty pleasure, has anybody watched Indian Matchmaker? Have you watched that on Netflix?
No.
Okay, so it's this woman. She professionally is a matchmaker, and she says, "Hello, I'm Seema from Mumbai." So she matchmakes people in India, but also here in the United States. So she travels all over. So she'll ask, a woman will say, "What are the things that are important to you?" She makes a list, and some of the lists are ridiculous. Like, he needs to be vegetarian and eat, such and such on a Sunday, but not a Monday. I mean, really crazy. And then she begins to, put people together. And of course, most of the time it does not work out because people are so picky. And she's 70%. You don't get 100%. It's really worth watching. And then there are some people there, one person in particular, I do not like. You just start to have some, characters on the shows that you just decide this one woman, she is mean, she is nasty. You should see how she treats the men. I mean, it's like really no, but you're not going to end up with anybody with that kind of attitude. But that's a
That's
lot.
why she's there.
she makes a
It's a
show.
lot of fun
A,
to
a,
watch.
a show I recommend is on Hulu, and it's called In Search of Soul Food. And it is a black female chef, a black American female chef out of LA, and she goes all around the country and all around the world, finding the connection. And what she means by soul food is like food that's indigenous and that's made by the people
Oh,
packaging. So, and then she makes some connections and talk, and especially in the states between uh, African foods and Native American foods, and then she goes to Appalachia and talks about there's black influences there, and then she goes overseas. She goes to Italy,
wow.
and it's very hip and modern, but also there's that underlying thread of how food really tells the story of a people.
Yes.
And she also talks about how yeah, there's no other better way of saying it, white supremacy has really had an impact on a lot of cultures around the world.
Colonialism, imperialism, racism, I'll just say it for you,
Yes,
has
okay, thank you. But it really, and
started.
she goes to Jamaica and just really Peru and all, and I didn't realize there was a whole contingent of Japanese people that are indigenous to Peru.
Oh, yes.
And so you learn all of these different things, and you see the, like you're saying, all the isms that influence it. Because that's how Japanese people got to Peru, was one of those isms there. But now they're there, and so you see a fully Japanese person speaking Spanish. So it's really kind of freaks you out a little bit. But they talk about how their culture influenced Peruvian food and ceviche, and how that whole
Oh,
process came together. There's some things here that we have in our culture, Black culture, that's really Native American, and there's a blending of culture. So I would say if you're kind of nerdy like me a little bit, but also like food, I think In
I
Search of
love
Soul
it.
Food.
In
Uh,
search of soul food.
I
Thank you.
have to tell you my show then now. American Homecoming. Have you all seen that? It's a Netflix show. And it's about HBCU Black culture.
I'm
I
talking about
love
All American, All American.
All American, but there's an All American
Homecoming.
American
That's when they go to
Homecoming too.
college.
There are
Yes.
two
Yes.
spin-offs, and it is so amazing, particularly if you're interested in seeing um, people who are championing for college students to get mental health, are
Yeah.
championing for the rights of all of us to have access to education without being alienated. I mean, it's amazing. Now, I can't say if it tops Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart or not. I'll just say they're both in a class of their own, and you should
Right.
see them.
Nobody can tell. Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart was a great program, and just as a humble brag, the All American, as a friend of mine from college that started that series.
I need you to ask him to be on my show and Dr. Gigi's show. Personal ask, sir, madam, I don't know who you are. Come on the show.
Listen to you.
It
That's
was
right.
effective. So so yeah, I watched the first iteration, first few seasons of All American, and then it just kept breaking off, and it did so well that they created the spinoff All American Homecoming. So we're very, very proud. Every time I see him, I'm like, dude, did you think it was going to blow up like that? He said I was happy to get season 2, and now it's
Wow. Cool.
So that it looks
I
like
love it, Goldie.
we're
I'm gonna put I'm gonna put Goldie. I'll put her guilty pleasure in there.
anger
On
management with Charlie Sheen.
Oh.
Golden, we're so glad that you
and
stuck with us. You might have left because but laughter is good for the soul, and it helps you to perhaps marijuana either makes you laugh more or it makes you need less marijuana.
Exactly.
we're getting all the dopamine released without having to touch any substance right now
Hey.
because of this show. I think this is and sometimes you need this has been group therapy.
Hey.
For us, we just did it on live. We did a live stream it on social media. But I think ultimately, as we're wrapping up, and Dr. Maddox and Dr. Gigi, I want you to give your final points. Um, I want to reiterate, number one, that there is a definite connection between substance use, not, you notice I didn't say abuse, between substance use and psychosis, and that's like severe mental illness when we're talking about schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, mania, depression. There is a correlation. So number one, if you're an adult and you're able to make adult decisions, I would say before you make that decision to use, please check your family history, and please check if you have any family history of mental illness. And then also, I would say seek therapy, because if you're using drugs as a self-soothing methodology, um, I would say therapy is a better route to take, so you can get to the root of what is bothering you, whether it's anxiety, depression, or anything you got going on, stressors in your life. Therapy is a better route to take than kind of medicate your own kind of self-medicating with drugs and or alcohol. So that's my final say. We'll go, Dr. Madison, Dr. Gigi. You can wrap us up since it's your show.
I will say, understand that our children are using marijuana, sometimes 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old. The question that I ask is, how did you get started? And many times they say they got it from their parents. So, parents, if you are going to use drugs, um, understand that your children may get access to that. Next thing is, don't leave them with your relatives that you already know make poor decisions, because many of their older uncles, cousins are introducing this to them as well. And finally, if you don't know how to have a conversation with your children about drugs, you can go to samhsa.gov, which is SAMHSA.gov, and you can Google, then put in the search engine about how to talk to your kids about drugs, and that will come out so that you can learn. But don't wait until they're 15 to tell them don't use drugs. Start very early, talking about this and integrating just age appropriate, having these mini conversations, because they listen to you, and it's so important.
And I'll close by first of all thanking you, Dr. Maddox. What a lovely special guest you were. And gosh, I wish that we could work in the clinic together. I've always wanted to. I'm serious. I mean, because when you're a general internist, a primary care doctor, I would say 50% of the work I do is actually related to mental health. And so I love the integrative practice that you have. But so thank you very much, and for your insights, and just your whole spirit and energy was lovely. For the audience, I just want to say that remember, you're important to me. I mean, I have not met you personally, but I know that there's a lot of talent out there. There are a lot of special people out there. There may be a lot of pain out there, but I also want you to know that this is one way to connect. Please look around and see who you can connect to. And it doesn't have to be major connections, doesn't even have to be a relationship. We're all in this together. And one of the things that I have learned as a doctor, and it's a lesson that I keep learning almost every day, people who look like they've got it together, invariably they don't. We all have something. We all have something. Our some things are different. So don't get fooled into thinking, oh, my life is so awful, but this person is so great. No, that's what's so great about getting older. You realize that nobody's got it figured out. But when you're a younger person, you just feel like the persona that you present has to be perfect. And that's why we're seeing all these problems that are out there. You are already perfect as you are. Please remember that. Thank
Good
you.
job.
Thank you so much. This was great. Please come back and visit